In the early 16th century, the world was expanding at a terrifying pace. For the men of Spain, the New World wasn't just a place on a map, it was a gamble. It was a chance for a man born into nothing to die as a king. Among these men, the conquistadors, none as polarizing as Francisco Pizarro. He wasn't a noble or a scholar. He was an illegitimate son of a colonel who spent his youth herding pigs in the dusty fields of Spain. But Pizarro had two things that made him dangerous: an iron will and the insatiable hunger for gold, along with his loyal brothers by his side. Today we're diving into the brutal successes and the bloody downfall of the man who toppled one of the greatest empires in the Americas, the Inca. From a swineherder to a soldier, Pizarro didn't find his success overnight. He was a veteran of the New World. Long before he became a leader, he sailed with Nicolas de Ovando at the age of 27, arriving in the New World in 1502, and later being Vasco Balboa's second in command, crossing Panama and being the first Europeans to discover the Pacific Ocean. In the 1520s, rumours began to swirl in Panama of a land of gold to the south. Pizarro formed a partnership with his fellow soldier, Diego de Almagro, and a priest called Hernando de Ligue. The first two expeditions were disasters. They faced starvation, hostile natives, and tropical diseases, completely exhausting their supplies. The famous line in the sand: on the island of Gallo, with his men, begging to go home, Pizarro drew a line in the sand with his sword. He pointed at it and said, "There lies Peru with its riches, here Panama and its poverty. Choose, each man, what best becomes of a brave Castilian." Only 13 men crossed that line. These famous 13 stayed, and their gamble paid off when they finally reached the city of Tombs, confirming the existence of a massive, wealthy civilization. By 1532, Pizarro returned with a royal license from the King of Spain. He arrived at a moment of pure luck. The Inca Empire was fractured. A brutal civil war between two brothers, Atahualpa and Hussar, had just ended. Atahualpa had won, but his empire was entirely exhausted. To understand how Pizarro, a man with no formal military education, pulled off the capture of an emperor, you have to look at the march to Cajamarca. It was a journey to be defined by extreme luck, psychological warfare, and a massive technological gap. Before Europeans discovering the Americas, there was no horses in the entirety of the North and South American continent. Pizarro began his march from the coastal town of Piura on September 24th, 1532. It took roughly 2 months to reach Cajamarca. The conquistadors had to climb from sea level into the heart of the Andes Mountains, reaching an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet. They struggled with altitude sickness, the narrowing of the mountain passes, where one single Inca ambush could have wiped them out. The invitation: Atahualpa knew exactly where they were. He had spies watching them all the way. However, he allowed them to pass because he was curious. He saw them as a small group of strangers drifting and planned to capture them himself, to use the horses for his own army. And the Inca were extremely interested in the blacksmiths, and especially the doctor. When Pizarro arrived, his force was minuscule compared to Atahualpa's 80,000 forces. With just a total of 168 Spaniards, comprised of 106 infantrymen, 62 cavalry, plus a few dozen African slaves and native interpreters. The Inca were using Bronze Age clubs, slings, and padded cotton armour. The Spanish brought steel and gunpowder, and European plate armour, making them almost invincible to the Inca's clubs and stones. But their two aces were the falconets, two small portable cannons, not very effective for the time, but completely intimidating to the natives with shock and awe. And the Spanish cavalry, though tiny, was extremely effective. Atahualpa invited Pizarro to meet in the city. The Inca emperor, viewing the Spanish as a mere curiosity, arrived with thousands of unarmed attendants. A Spanish priest approached the emperor holding a crucifix and made a speech about God, the Trinity, the Pope, and the King of Spain, and demanding that Atahualpa renounce his false gods, convert to Christianity, acknowledge himself as a tributary and a subject of the Spanish king. Atahualpa, who was a man who believed he was a living god and the son of the sun, he was not impressed by the idea of a king across the sea. With a famous reply: "I will be no man's tribute. I am greater than any prince upon the earth. As for the Pope of whom you speak, he must be crazy to talk of giving away countries which do not belong to him." The meeting was taking place in a large courtyard in the city. After his reply, Valverde, Pizarro's priest, turned back towards the Spanish soldiers hiding in the buildings and shouted, come out, Christians come out at these enemy dogs who reject the things of God." That tyrant throw my book of holy law to the ground, I absolve you. That was the signal. Pizarro gave the order, and the cannons fired. The massacre had begun. Tearing through the crowds, steel blades cut through cotton armour. In less than an hour, thousands of Inca were dead, and the emperor himself was a prisoner. Offering to fill a room once with gold and twice with silver, in exchange for his life, Pizarro agreed, and for months the treasures of the empire flowed into Cajamarca. But once the room was full, Pizarro broke his word. Fearing an Inca uprising, and his own men becoming extremely angry at the emperor, he put him on trial for treason and executed him by garrote in 1533. But this was an outrage even to some of the conquistadors. Pizarro's brother Hernando was reportedly furious when they found out Atahualpa had been executed while they were away from camp. Even the Spanish king wrote to Pizarro of how annoyed he was and venting his anger. You'd think this would be the end of the story, the hero or villain retiring in luxury, but the conquistador were men of war, not peace. Greed soon turned the Spanish against each other. Pizarro's old partner, Diego de Almagro, felt cheated out of his share of the spoils, and the governorship of the wealthy city of Cusco. This sparked a vicious Spanish civil war. In the middle of the Andes, Pizarro's forces eventually defeated Almagro at the Battle of Las Salinas and executed him, but Almagro had a son, and his followers were known as the Men of Chile. Having nothing left to lose, on June 26, 1541, a group of Almagro's supporters stormed Pizarro's palace in Lima. Even now, late in his 60s, Pizarro fought like a demon. He struggled to put on his armour as the assassins broke into his dining room. He killed 2 of them before being stabbed in the throat. As he lay dying, rumour has it he drew a cross on the ground with his blood and kissed it, crying out Jesus before his last breath. Pizarro's legacy is a scar across history to some. To others he was a visionary who expanded the Spanish Empire and brought Christianity to the Andes, but in reality he was a ruthless marauder who destroyed the sophisticated culture for the sake of greed. His greatest achievement was found in the city of Lima, which remains the capital of Peru today, but he also introduced a system of exploitation that would exist for centuries after. Of the Pizarro brothers, the 4 brothers and the stepbrother, 4 out of the 5 would die by the sword. Hernando, the only one to survive the wars, he returned to Spain to defend the family's honour, but was thrown into prison for 20 years. He died old, wealthy, but a broken man at nearly 100 years old.